Right before we jump into this video, if you'd like me to send you a free guide to capturing motion in low light situations, just look for this orange box over on FroKnowsPhoto.com, put your name, email address in it, hit send it, and I'm gonna send you that guide for free. Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com, and this is basically a real-world review of the Nikon 400mm f2.8 TC, meaning it has a built-in 1.4 teleconverter. Now, if you did check out our preview of this lens, we honestly only had that thing for about an hour, and we couldn't share all of the specs or information about it, but this time, I got to go out in the real world and shoot two, count them, two Philadelphia Union soccer games, as well as 3 Philadelphia Phillies games, and my nephew, his very first baseball game. Now, the reason I shot so much is because Firmware 2.0 was announced 2 days after I did my initial testing with the 400 and the Z9. So when I say Firmware 2.0, I'm referring to the firmware in the Nikon Z9. And the last thing I wanted to do was put out a video and have people in the comments say, well, you're testing it with the old firmware. All those issues were corrected with the Firmware 2.0. And the issues that I found were not really corrected in Firmware 2.0 that happened in Firmware 1.0, but I did get some really great images, and you will see a full slideshow at the very end of this video because there are a lot of images to share with you. And in this video, you're also going to see a lot of EVF footage as well as a montage of the EVF footage so you can just see it working and make up your own mind. But let's jump into the outside of this lens. This is the lens right here. It feels great in the hands, it has awesome balance, and Nikon did a fantastic job putting this together for their first big ass piece of glass for the Z mount system. Hey Steven, what color's the printing on this shirt?
Gold.
What color is this ring right here?
Gold.
Yeah, gold. Nikon says it's yellow. No, my highlighter's yellow. This is gold. Call it the gold ring. Not a big deal. You're not buying this because of a ring or not a ring. I have the lens hood attached to it right here. It's the old way. You screw it on, it comes off, you screw it back on, it goes like this, and it bayonets the other way. Do not lose this because I think it's over $1,000 to replace it. That's one thing you don't want to do. Right here, this piano looking key one, this is a control ring that you can go ahead and map out. You also have a control ring behind there. That's where if you want to change your aperture using something like this or your ISO, you would go ahead and do that. I personally don't use that. This is your manual focus ring, which you hopefully don't have to use too often. I did need to use it when I was trying to shoot through fencing because I had to tell the focus that I want to focus on something behind the fencing and not the fence itself. Flip it around this way. This is where your teleconverter is hiding. When it's up, it's not in place. So it's at 1x, meaning you're getting 400 millimeters. When you flip it down, you now go to 1.4x converter, making this a 560 millimeter f4 lens. So it's awesome that you have a 400 2.8, and then you flick this up and you have that 1.4 converter in line. Now, you know I'm not a big fan of converters, but having it built in is going to be optically better than adding it to the back of the lens. Speaking of teleconverters, you can still add more teleconverters to the back of this, the Nikon 1.4, as well as the Nikon 2X converter. So you can get a lot of extra oomph on it if that's what you so choose to do. Like all pro lenses now, you have these custom buttons. You've got one here, you got another one here, you got another one all the way around on the other side right here. So you can set those as programmable buttons if you want to get focus on second base at a baseball game and then have the pitcher set for another one. Honestly, I don't think you need to do that. The focus system should be that good that it should just snap into place when you point it where it needs to be. On this side of the lens, you have your manual to autofocus, you have your full and limit, and in order to turn off the VR, you're gonna have to turn that off inside of the camera. Now, this weighs in at 6.5 pounds or 2,950 grams, which is 20% lighter than the F mount version. Another thing I want to point out is you've got this, you can unlock your tripod collar right here. Jared, unlock. Oh, I'm in a different position. Unlock, Jared, unlock. There we go. You're smart and you've got muscles. So this is how you rotate it on your monopod. Because I do use a monopod with this. This isn't something you want to handhold for a while. You can get away with it. The image stabilization is going to work and be great, but there's these white dots Steven should be able to get these white dots. You see how they're lined up? That means that you are lined up in the perfect position that it's going to be flat. Now, the Canon version has a click when you get there, so you know exactly when you're centered vertically and exactly when you're centered horizontally. I personally like that. This lens does not have that. Is that a deal breaker, Steven? The answer? No. The answer is no. That's not a deal breaker. That's just something that I wish I had in this lens. For those of you who want to add ND or circular polarizing filters to this lens, you have a drop-in filter area right here. You pop it out. You go like that, you pop it back in, you lock it up, and now you're in there. Now, one of the biggest selling points of this lens is that this is the first time that Nikon has used what's called Silky Swift voice coil motors. Now, it incorporates magnets, which also comes with a warning. Warning, anybody out there with a pacemaker, don't do this. Oh my God, wait, wrong reaction, but if you have a pacemaker, maybe you'd like that reaction or not. But it's just a warning that they put on this because of the size of those magnets. They put it on cell phones as well, but just don't put it near a pacemaker. And if you have a pacemaker, because a lot of Nikon shooters are that old that they require pacemakers, so just be careful if you're buying this lens. Now let's jump into the images. You're gonna see images from the Philadelphia Phillies, you're gonna see my nephew, you're gonna see soccer, you're gonna see Phillies again, you're gonna see soccer again, because over the last few weeks, I went out and shot the Phillies and the Philadelphia Union again and again, firmware 1 and firmware 2. So let's jump in and talk about how this worked out. What do I like? What don't I like? What issues did I find? Now, the first thing you may see in this photo, now this is the goalie during warm-ups. He is diving across to save balls. They're just kicking them at him. This is a good way to test out the continuous autofocus. Now, I was in all the different modes. I tried them throughout this review. I tried 3D lock-on tracking, which is how I set my Canon and how I set my Sony A1. I tried, and I made sure that the people lock-on tracking was on for eye detect, not animals, because I don't want to have the wrong one set. I tried the new boxes that you can control where you can get 20 different sizes. I tried that for shooting soccer, and I also went back to dumbing it all the way down to doing dynamic area AF, the old school way of doing it, which is basically going to take the closest thing to the frame and get it in focus, which means if the goalie was to dive out of the way, which I have examples of this, then the focus is going to leave the goalie because the goalie's out of the way, and it's going to end up focusing on something on the background, which is exactly what happened on a penalty kick. When the goalie dove out of the way, the focus shifted to the back post, which means I didn't get any photos of the goalie diving. Where in this case, with the lock-on tracking, the goalie could move all over the place, and the lock-on tracking, and this was with version 1 firmware, was able to find him without a problem. Now in the background, you notice the banding. You're gonna get that depending on your shutter speed because you don't have the option of having a mechanical shutter. Now, is this a Nikon only issue? And the answer is no. You would see this with the Sony and you would see this with the Canons. Now with the Canons and the Sonys, you have the extra shutter, well, you have the shutter built in that you could also activate, or you have the variable shutter that you can set to time to the specific flickering of the boards. Is it a big deal? I don't really think it's that big of a deal. I don't worry about it that much, but it ended up being a pretty good shot. Let me jump in here real quick because I want to show you this photo taken with the 400-2.8 and edited with FroPack 3, starting with Zoolander. Zoolander looks really good. Then we've got Prestige Worldwide, which is a pretty natural looking preset, followed by Mount Airy to give you that light and airy look. This one looks awesome with King contrast. Then we've got Canadian Tuxedo, and my favorite from FroPack 1 jumping up here is Skittles. Look how amazing that looks with just one click. Oh yeah, and it's gonna do the same thing on your phone because these work on mobile. So if you're looking to speed up your RAW workflow or give yourself a great starting point or take them with you on the road, we created 15 custom Lightroom presets that you can check out right now at FroKnowsPhoto.com/FroPack3. While you're over there, you can play with the sliders to see the befores and the afters. If you decide to pick them up right now, they are currently on sale, or you could save even more when you get the triple play bundle, which includes FroPack 1, 2, and 3, which is also going to give you Skittles. Now, let's get back to the video. this with the guy running across the field, this is 400 millimeters. It tracked him really well. But what I noticed really early on was an issue where if the focus moved to the background, it would stay locked on there even when the subject had the focus box around their head and tracked them and was active green. So whenever you see the focus box being green, that means my finger is pressed halfway down and it is tracking the subject and trying to find them. If it's grayed out, that means it's just there waiting for me to activate it and press the button halfway down. Now, I didn't know if this was a lens issue or a firmware issue or a camera issue. I sent it to Nikon and they are currently looking into it because even when I updated to firmware 2.0, I still had the same issue. It happened at soccer and it also happened at the Phillies game. It's a specific case that I noticed it on mostly at 400 millimeters where it slips to the background and then the subject is there and the point is hovering over them and it's not switching back. And when you see me tapping the button because it goes from green to gray to green to gray, that's me trying to tell the focus, hey man, will you please focus on the right thing? And so that's something that I hope they fix. I don't know if it happens with other lenses right now because I was just testing out the 400 2.8, but I hope they do fix it because it will cause you to miss shots. If you are tracking a subject and it bounces to the background and you're trying to get the foreground subject or the person that's running that you want, it may not be able to lock on to them. And that could be an issue that leads to missing shots. And I did miss a few shots because of that. But I do want to reiterate that the autofocus with lock-on tracking still is going to help me get shots that I otherwise would have missed. So don't take that the wrong way. I'm just pointing out an issue that I found and sent to Nikon with version 2 firmware, confirmed that it still has that same exact issue. Now this is all the way across the field with the 1.4 converter in play. It's great for getting the goal. So basically across the soccer pitch, you could have post to post with the goalie and still get great results with the teleconverter. I didn't notice the focus missing any more or less with the teleconverter in, and I think the quality is really good that I got. I'm also happy with the quality of the Nikon files. I've always been happy with the Nikon files. Now over to the Phillies game, we've got Bryce Harper right here. This is a vertical shot at 460 millimeters with the converter in. And this photo right here is one of the sharpest, ow, I actually cut my finger on it when I zoomed in because that's how sharp it is. This is one of the sharpest photos I've ever seen out of the Z9, which tells me that it's absolutely capable of getting extremely sharp images with this lens. And I say that because there's certain times where I'm looking at files from the Z9 and I'm like, and I'm questioning whether it's tack sharp on the subject or not, or is it on the glove? So I've noticed this, but when I looked at this image, I was like, this is like the perfect shot. Great composition, no cropping done here, 1.4 converter in, 20 frames a second raw. This isn't the 120 frames per second. This is an awesome shot of Bryce Harper. Printed this out on the Canon ProGraph 1000. It looks absolutely fantastic. It's for Steven's brother. He wanted one, but if you guys want one, leave a comment down below that I want that Bryce Harper photo from the Canon printer, and I'll pick one of you to send that printer to. Correction, I'm not sending you the printer. I meant send you the actual print. Sorry if I got you all excited. I'm not gonna send you the printer at this time, just a print. Moving on, I decided to move into the Diamond Club area, which isn't exactly down on the field, but it's not up top. That was gonna give me a good shot, a good angle on getting the pitcher. And right here, we have the pitcher who just released the ball. The batter hit the ball back to the pitcher, because you can see, as I zoom in on the ball, that ball is heading into the field. And I didn't keep taking pictures as the pitcher threw up his glove and it smacked right into the middle of the glove, and then I believe he throws it to second base. But thankfully, I have the EVF recorder on, and you can see it happening in real time. For whatever reason, I just didn't react. I knew I wanted to get him pitching. I went brrr, and then I stopped, because who knew that he was gonna hit the ball right back up the middle, but the EVF recorder has it. Now this is where, see, Nikon has that new pre-shoot and post-shoot in the Z9, in the new firmware. That only means when you're shooting 30 frames a second or 120 frames per second, as soon as you press the shutter halfway down, it starts recording for up to a full second before, and I believe a half second or a full second after. But that doesn't happen with RAW files. One day, the cameras are absolutely gonna start buffering before we start shooting, and we're gonna get pre-shot and post-shot, which is going to be pretty cool when that actually happens. Then another shot of Bryce Harper batting. The reason I chose this image, this one's 400mm to show you. I mean, I love the colors. Skittles did a great job on this, but I wanna zoom in on the ball. People always ask, like, why is the ball kind of egg-shaped? I thought that the Nikon did a great job at getting rid of that. I've noticed fastballs, they're moving 90, 95 miles an hour. You're gonna get some bowing right here. It's not terrible. We don't have bowing of the bat. I mean, it's ever so slightly doing it. Nikon has a super fast readout speed. I don't think that this is an issue, but a lot of people wanna know why is the ball oblong, and that's because of how it's being read off the sensor. One day, that's gonna continue to get better and better. Right now, it's not exactly perfect, but it's not a problem with the Nikon because I haven't noticed it too often. Now, from the third base dugout side where I get to photograph from, down on the field, kind of underneath the field, it puts you in a great line. I have a nice shot of the third base area. When I posted this particular image, a lot of people commented on the bokeh. They're like, that's ugly bokeh. I don't like the way that looks. I can't tell you whether I like or don't like it, but all I can tell you is that it's a $14,000 lens. I don't think it really matters to the people that are buying it because they don't really care what that looks like in the background. I think it looks perfectly fine. It's unique. Those people are 400 feet away behind this guy. I love the colors, the tones, the reflection, everything that we were able to pull out of this image. Just the hyper focus that you have and isolation on the subject, that's what it looks like, and it looks fantastic right there. Moving on, I like to move around the stadium. Now I went upstairs to the top deck because I like, with a long lens like this, you're like, well, I've got a built-in teleconverter. Let's see what I can capture from up here. Now, this is a play that's 387 feet away from home plate. I'm probably another at least 50 feet behind home plate plus up higher, and this is the framing that you get at 560 millimeters. It shows you that you could get some action at the wall. If someone goes to jump up over the wall to catch a ball, you could do it from up there. You can also activate the DX crop mode, which I didn't do for the Phillies here, but I did do for the soccer, and I'll show you an example of that later. But that gives you 840 millimeters, still a 25 megabyte file, because remember, you got 45 megapixels that you're working with here, and then it gives you a 25-ish megabyte file if you go into that DX mode. But you could also just crop later if that's what you wanted to do, just in case that you didn't want to actually cut something off. So that totally worked out. Now, tracking subjects running around the bases was a little interesting with the 3D tracking. That's what I chose to use because that's what I use with the Canon and the Sony. Sometimes it worked and it was pretty jumpy. I believe it was more jumpy, in my opinion, with version 1 than version 2. So I think it's more accurate with version 2, but it's not like night and day more accurate. It's still bouncing around and it's still not as good as the Sony and not as good as the Canon, but it's still pretty good. It still gets the job done. Now, tracking the subjects running around the field, you're gonna have shots that are out, you're gonna have shots that are soft, you're gonna have shots that are mostly in. And in this case, I got McCutcheon, I keep saying Metuchen, like we're getting off at Metuchen on the Amtrak, but it's McCutcheon running around the bases. Great framing. Is this 400 millimeters? This is 400 millimeters. Filling the frame a great way, really isolating the subject. He looks great here. The colors and the tones are awesome. Again, Skittles coming in strong for this. Skittles works great for outdoors, baseball, for landscapes. I'm not trying to sell it right there, but I mean, it just sells itself because it looks so darn good. Let me jump in here real quick and let you know that this video is brought to you by Squarespace. If you're looking to build your very own online portfolio to share your photos with, get a Squarespace, because you don't need to know coding. It's easy, it's simple. You get stuff up there really quick, and it's affordable. Head on over to squarespace.com/FroKnowsPhoto to get your 14-day free trial. If you decide that it's for you, use the code FroKnowsPhoto at checkout to get 10% off your first order. Next up, we had a play at home plate and 400 millimeters from that inside third base area, which is different. Let me paint you up, actually pop up that picture, Dan, of where I was sitting. You got the netting in there. What a great place to watch a game. I tell you, that place is awesome. That shot was taken with the new Sony 24-70 2.8, which is not a great sports lens, by the way, but I would have rather have had that on than a 400mm. A lot of the sports shooters have a 400mm and then maybe a 70 to 200 in their lap or on their neck so that when a play is going to happen at the plate, they can hold it up and they can snap off a bunch of shots. This is not ideal for plays at home plate unless you're further into the outfield. But I was really happy that the focus was able to find the subjects and lock on and give you a shot that's in focus. Is it really a great shot? The answer is no, Jared. It's not that great of a shot because you can't see the foot, you can't see home plate, so you don't know if he was safe or out. He was safe, by the way. Count that run. Okay, Firmware 2.0 came out after all of these shoots. So I had to go out and reshoot again. I got to go photograph my nephew, who was gonna play his first baseball game. And look what you can do with the 400mm for this headshot. I was like, hey Jace, look over here. He looked over here, focus found his eye, banged it off, boom, got that shot. When he was coming in from the outfield after warming up, I was like, ooh, look at this, I'm gonna go vertical. This is the composition that I shot. This is not cropped. That is called filling the frame. It's isolated with him, perfect. I was really happy with how the Z9 nailed this shot. Now, I shouldn't be that surprised. It shouldn't be that hard to get a photo like this. After my nephew's baseball game, I drove down I-95 for about an hour to get to the Philadelphia Union so that I could test out this lens with the new firmware because I had to redo it, as I've said a couple of times. I tried to focus on using a different focus mode this time around, the dynamic area AF. That's not ideal in many situations. I also did use that new box, and I found that to be very difficult for shooting soccer. I may have needed to shrink that box or not use it a certain way, but I didn't find that it was really necessary. I think that the autofocuses in those other systems, the Canons and the Sony, kind of have all of these distractions in the frame, but know where to focus, and I shouldn't have to shrink a box down to tell the focusing system to say, hey, just look here, unless it's a very specific need. Like tennis, someone right over the net, and I only wanted to find that area and not ever focus on the net, maybe that would be a good use case scenario. The Canons offer you different cases, which is similar to this, but I think it's easier to control the Canon one than it is to control the Nikon one. But good soccer action. You know, when it nailed the subjects, it was good. When it bounced to the background, it was harder to get back in focus. This is using dynamic area AF when this subject was running up the field. He started to run across, you banged it out, the shots worked because they're mostly filling the frame. Now, if the subject was to do a slide tackle and go down to the ground, that focus is probably gonna shift and end up missing him, whereas if you did trust the 3D tracking, which you can do for the most part with the Nikon, it would have still tracked him and still hopefully got him in focus. Next up, there was a penalty kick. And earlier I talked about it focusing. I focused on the goalie, and when the goalie dove, when the ball was kicked, it focused on the goalpost, which defeats the whole purpose. But the lock-on tracking would have done better. So when the penalty shot happened, I chose to focus on the goalie horizontally to hope to get a diving shot of the goalie, and then quickly switch to vertical to get the shot of the celebration if the guy scored. And the guy did score, and thankfully he came over to our sideline to get the shot. Now this was mostly his reaction. He didn't do very much. He went, and yeah, he went like that. And that's what I got. And I used a dynamic area. I'm not happy with my composition here because I cut off his feet. Other photographers would probably just go in, zoom in, crop to the knees or right below the knees and call it a day. Newspaper guys could do that all day long, but the dynamic area ended up working for that. How many times have you seen soccer players and they just lay on the field like they got shot or something? Well, this is a photo that's just like that. This player's here like he is about to die. And there's too much of this in soccer. Just get up and play and stop. I'm holding my head. Oh my God, I'm so hurt. And guess what? He got up and he played 2 seconds later. Whatever. 1.4 teleconverter put in gives you 560 millimeters. Put it into DX crop mode and you get it right here, which is the 840 millimeter equivalent. It gives you a punch in. If you really need it, you can do it and try to focus in on the goalie at a super distance. After shooting a half of the Philadelphia Union, hopped back in the car, drove towards Philly, back to home, but went to the Phillies game. Now that I have an all-access pass to every single game in every single stadium, I'm gonna start traveling to different stadiums. Maybe I'll see you guys there. This one is super sharp. Just look at the isolation you get from the background. It looks fantastic. fantastic. Let me jump in here and say, are you looking to purchase this lens or any camera gear for that matter? Go where I go to get my gear. Go to allenscamera.com/fro. That's my affiliate link. It helps me out. But they've been around for over 40 years. They're a mom and pop store. They do a great job. Check them out at allenscamera.com/fro. I did make a mistake, which kind of really wasn't a mistake. I had the 1/4 converter in, and the player starts, hit the ball, and he's running. I think he ends up getting a triple, and he's rounding second base, and I nailed it. Top to bottom, nailed it. Do I care that there's a distraction of like the umpire moving? Well, no, that's part of the game. But to be able to pick up the runner as he was running is good. This one was with the dynamic area AF. I didn't have on the 3D tracking because I was seeing how the dynamic area AF would work. In this case, it worked. It's not going to work in every single case, especially the one where we have this batter at home plate. The only reason I chose this is because it's focused in on his arm. You can see the material is nice and sharp, but his face is not nice and sharp. Some people may be like, oh, that's good enough. Nah, good enough is not good enough anymore. 20 years ago, you're like, yeah, it's soft, it's a little bit out. Yeah, no big deal. Today, with the technologies that we have, it's got to find the face. And in this situation, if you have dynamic area AF, it's most likely going to find the closest thing to the frame, which is then going to mean that it's out of focus and you have a great lens and it's rendering it not perfect at that case. Now, I loved being able to sit right near home plate, near the batting circle for the opposing team. It gives you a great angle to use the 400mm to bang out shots just like this one of the pitcher. This is what you're looking for, and this is what makes a 400 2.8 so great. And what makes this so great again is you do have the option for that 1/4 teleconverter. It's fast focusing, it's accurate to some extent in most situations. It's also expensive, and we'll get to the price in just a minute. And the last thing I want to show you photo-wise before we get to the sniff test, wind tunnel test, at the end of this video, there's the slideshow of my favorite photos, as well as a montage from the EVF so that you can see exactly what was going on inside of the viewfinder. I had an idea. Go into 120 frames per second mode with the 400mm and try to get the ball on the bat. Now, there's a lot of guesswork that goes on here because you don't know if the pitch is going to be high or low or right down the middle, and you don't know how far the batter is going to extend, because if it's an outside pitch, he has to extend further. So I had to guess my framing here and lock in on the face of the subject and hope that when they swing, they are in the right angle, and because the ball is in the right place, and hopefully I would get the bat on the ball. One of the firmware upgrades in version 2.0 is when you're shooting at 120 frames per second, you now know that you're actually taking shots because you see the blinking border around the outside of the frame. So good on Nikon for making that fix. That's one of the recommendations I told them as soon as I picked up this camera. But I got super lucky to get a shot like this. 120 frames per second, I've got that 4 megabyte JPEG file, and I got bat on ball, and I got a broken bat. This is awesome. This is unexpected that this happened, and I was able to just get the framing right, and just everything came together. Ball on bat, broken bat, really good composition, and nailed it. That is incredible that you can do that. I suspect in the future, I don't know if it's 5 years down the road, we're gonna start to getting to 120 frames per second in full res RAW. We're gonna get to that point at some time, but even having that ability doesn't mean you're gonna get the composition right. I was able to get the composition right. Now let's give this a sniffy sniff and give it a sniff test. You know what it smells like, Steven?
What?
Sexual chocolate. I don't know what sexual chocolate is, but if this was sexual chocolate, that's what it would smell like. Sexual chocolate. Hashtag sexual chocolate. Wind tunnel test. Passed the wind tunnel test. That was a very new version of the wind tunnel test, and it passed with flying colors. This is a $14,000 lens. It's more expensive than the old 400 2.8 because there's a lot of new technology and obviously inflation, but the built-in teleconverter adds it. Who is this lens for? If you're a professional working sports photographer, birder, wildlifer, you make money, or you already made a shit ton of money in your life and have plenty of stuff to spend it on, because a lot of Nikon shooters are older, they're in retirement, they got a lot of their retirement fund to dip into, you might as well pick up one of these lenses. Pros don't ask the question. Yes, they're upset that this is a $14,000 lens that they have to spend on it, especially for the people that just got 400 2.8 f lenses. You're gonna lose a lot of money on that lens when you sell it or trade it in, but this is Absolutely worth it. If you stuck around long enough to have a Nikon Z9 to wait for that, and you're sticking with the system, the 400 2.8 for a pro is a must-have for sports shooters. No questions asked, but those guys make money, and the newspapers make money, and they're gonna buy these lenses and furnish them with the people that are still shooting with Nikon. So let me know what questions you have down below. Questions, comments, concerns, like, share, comment, subscribe, all of that good stuff. Now, let's get to the slideshow and the EVF montage. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'm gonna sign off. That stuff's gonna pop on Jared, Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com. Enjoy.